Date is May 7th, 2024, village board meeting.
All right, very good. The record show all the members are in attendance or virtual. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
with which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty.
Is there any communication from board or staff?
Yeah, I just got something real quick. This week it was 75 and sunny on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and went through the Darwin community groups times, and the bathrooms are open now. It looks like it's fully open for the summer. And all the questions I had was, when are we going to do the volleyball nets? It was so beautiful this weekend, and the volleyball nets are still out. But everything else is open. They moved the temporary bathroom over to Farmers Field, which was the plan, and the bathrooms are open, which is really good. Impact all weekends. We'd like to get those nets set up as soon as possible. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other comments or correspondence? Okay, very good. Minutes of the previous meeting, April 30th, Trustee Lancaster, you said you had a couple of comments on the minutes.
Yes, thank you. First one, page 4 of the minutes. Actually, page 4 in the packet, sorry. Item I, the address for the approval of purchase of Cameo Court, that address should read W6016 Cameo Court. The second item, page 6 in the packet, item V as in Victor, for drafting a referendum for increasing the levy limit. We also specified without increasing taxes, so I just want to make sure that that direction is noted. And then I have one more. The last one is when we did the vote to go into closed session. Trustee Brandmeier did not vote nay. He voted A.
I was going to say that.
And that's
Okay,
it.
and there's one other addition to the closed session portion of the minutes. We did not include a time when we asked Manager Heiser to be excused. And it was roughly 5 minutes, I believe, after Vicki left. You remember that with me, Andy? It was about 5 minutes after.
Yeah, I was
Roughly.
watching the, yeah, sure.
So we need to add that also to the closed session portion of the minutes. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected for the April 30th, 2024 board meeting.
For a second,
I'll second.
vote your ballot, since we do have this here. And then, Trustee Baldwin? How do you vote? Julie, are you there? Julie?
Just raising her hand.
Oh, aye? Okay, can you turn your audio on, Julie? Turn your audio on.
Yes, we can. Aye. I'm sorry.
Oh, here you go. Okay, so Julie votes aye. Matt? Trustee Lancaster? Aye, okay. Let the record show the motion is carried unanimously. All right. So, board review appointments. The background is May 28th, 2024 at 6 p.m. So before our regular board meeting, at the May meeting, we'll have the initial meeting for the board review. We'll have myself and 2 trustees, 2 volunteer trustees. Whoever the trustees that want to volunteer have to also be available for the August 7th meeting at 10:30 in the morning. So you guys have not had a chance to check your calendars. we need to make that appointment tonight so that we are set for the board review on the 28th. So.
Here.
Jolene, are you volunteering?
Yes, I'm volunteering.
Okay, so Jolene is one. I need one more volunteer.
I'm gonna be on vacation.
You're on vacation, Darlene? All right, Mark? Are you too far off for you to tell?
Yeah, multiple.
Too far off to tell? Scott, too far off to tell?
On vacation.
You're on vacation, Matt? Too far off for you to tell?
Exactly.
All right, so then Darlene and Julene will be the two appointed trustees. And then as far as alternates, can I
You can put me down.
put down trustee Van Hefty and trustee Lancaster for alternates? Or you're on vacation then, Matt?
Daytime's hard, just depends on what's going on in my full-time job, so.
Yep. All right, so that's why you're an alternate. Okay, so we'll put trustee Van Hefty and Lancasters as the alternates and Bartline and Baldwin as the regulars. All right, so we need a motion to approve the May 28th, 2024 initial meeting at 6 p.m. with the adjournment to Wednesday, August 7th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. We need that motion. We need a motion for the board review, guys.
I'll make a motion, for the board review for the dates of May 28th. And also August 7th with, Julian Baldwin and Darlene Bartline as the primaries, and with Mark Van Hefty and,
Matt Lancaster.
Matt Lancaster as alternates for the board of review.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Second by Darlene. Any discussion? Hearing none, vote your ballot.
I can't, because somebody has to push the button for Baldwin and Lancaster, we're stuck until somebody pushes their buttons. One is by you and one is by you.
I vote aye.
Okay, all right. And you've got, all right, then we get to vote again?
Yeah.
All right. And then Matt, how do you vote?
I just want to note for the record that if it would come down that I would need to be an alternate, I need some notice, and I'll do my best, but I just can't promise at this point, so.
Understood. Understood. Okay,
And vote for-
you want to vote for Matt? Okay, let the record show the motion is carried unanimously. Very good. All right, that takes care of our housekeeping. No old business, but we do have new business. So our comprehensive plan. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all for making some time for me tonight. I promise I don't intend to keep you for 4 hours like I heard some of your recent
God.
meetings went. Right. Oh, there we go. But we wanted to just take some time to introduce you all to the comprehensive planning process that we've been working with Chad on, and kind of get this process kind of kicked off more in the public facing realm, but also with the village board. And so if we move to slide 2, today what we hope to cover are just some introductions to me. I'm Mitch Browse. I'm a planner with SRF Consulting Group, as well as introducing you all to some of our team members who are not here today, who will be contributing quite a bit to this process, some of which you'll see in person, others you may not see up here. Then we'll talk generally at a high level about what is comprehensive planning, what are we looking to achieve through this process. Talk a little bit more specifically about the update to the Village of Harrison's comprehensive plan, the process that we've laid out with Chad and others at the village. And then we'd like to kind of get into discussing from the board point of view, what are the key issues and opportunities that the village are facing that are really important for us to address as a part of this planning process. And so We'll start this discussion. It's gonna be by no means the last chance you all will have to give us feedback throughout this process. But we'd like to hear, at least at the beginning, what are the key items that you all believe we need to make sure we're paying attention to as we get into updating the comprehensive plan. So we jump to the next slide. We can do a few introductions for you all. As you can see, my name is Mitch Rouse. As I said previously, I work for SRF Consulting Group. We are a full-service planning and engineering firm. Our office is in Madison, as well as we have our headquarters in the city of Minneapolis. We're also at the same time working with Calumet County to update their comprehensive plan, and so we're really engulfing ourselves in the larger Harrison and Calumet County community. I have about 9 years of planning experience. Prior to working at SRF, I did work in the public side of planning, and so I worked for 2 counties, one in Iowa and one in the city, or excuse me, the state of Washington. And so one of the things that I like to share is that I kind of understand what it's like to actually try to implement these plans. And so we really strive to give you all a plan that will be useful, helpful, implementable. It's not just gonna kind of sit on a shelf, which is, you know, one of the, you'll hear me say a few planning cliches throughout the night, but that's one planning cliche that we like to use a lot. We want this plan to be actively being used by staff as well as the community and also the village board and decision makers. Beyond that, we have just 3 people on the screen here today. Stephanie Falkers, who is kind of our community planning lead within our company, and so she'll provide some oversight. She'll kind of keep engaged in this process, be a good resource for us to bounce ideas off of, and just help us out throughout the process. In addition to that, we have Scott Pooter, Will Fenner, and then Leah Ciro, who didn't make it on the slide, who will do a bulk of the actual planning work on this project. And so you'll see some of them come in and out, but you'll see their fingerprints on a lot of the work that we provide to you and a lot of the drafts, because they will be doing a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting, research, and content development, things like that. So we jump to the next slide. What we'll be getting into is comprehensive planning, kind of at a high level. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? So as many of you I'm sure know, the state law does require communities to have comprehensive plans in order to help guide their zoning decisions. And so within state law, we're required to include 9 key elements in comprehensive plans. Those are the ones shown on the screen. 7 of them are topic specific. So we're talking things like housing, transportation, land use, utilities and community facilities. And then there's kind of 2 overarching elements that the law requires us to include, and that's issues and opportunities, which we'll begin the discussion on today, and then implementation, which is the actions and the specific items that will put in place to help you all achieve the intended goals and actually implement your comprehensive plan. And so if we kind of take a step back and look more generally, and we can jump to the next slide, comprehensive planning. You know, what we're ultimately trying to do is give you all a document that can be used by elected officials, staff, residents to help guide community decision making. The reason why we like to be really clear and specify that, you know, those kind of 3 main parties is that, you know, we want it to be helpful and useful for you and staff to help make decisions for the future of the village. But we also want to make sure that we're providing a planning document that's accessible to everyday community residents. And so that helps them understand why you may be making land use decisions or zoning or development decisions that you are. It'll help add some predictability for them when it comes to how is the community expecting to grow? What are the next things we're trying to achieve? Within the plan, we will have a pretty specific future growth plan, and we'll include a future vision that kind of identifies the desired outcomes for the community. We hope that this plan will be built from community engagement, and there's already a significant amount of community engagement built into the existing plan, but we'll do some additional engagement as part of this process. And what we find is that by doing that upfront engagement, education about comprehensive planning, community members then have a little bit more ownership over the plan rather than seeing it as something coming from the government to kind of direct how we can live. And so the hope is that people can see their feedback reflected in what the ultimate version of the plan is. And then finally, the document will include a plan for implementation, as I mentioned earlier, and then we hope that this will be a living document. I do want to give you all a lot of credit. Because typically we update these things on a 10-year timeframe, which is again what state law says, and that's pretty standard across the country. But with the significant amount of growth that the village has seen, of course, and the most recent plan being adopted in 2017, you've acknowledged that it's time and that there's such changes in the community that it's important that we reassess things and update the comprehensive plan. And so when we think about it being a living document, it's that understanding that your community is going to continue to change and grow over time. And so we need to make the plan flexible enough that it can adjust to some of those changes, but also acknowledge that if we see these really significant changes, we maybe just need to take a step back and reassess the plan if data is needed. And like I said, that you are doing this process in advance of that kind of 10-year time frame, I think is a really good sign that you're being reactive to what's happening within the village. So we jump to the next slide. When we think more specifically about what we'll be looking to achieve as a part of this process, we hope to develop or update the Village of Harrison's plan to provide updated overall goals for the community. Again, as I mentioned before, the idea behind that is we're trying to identify what is our desired future outcome for the Village of Harrison. Do we want to continue to grow? What do we want that growth to look like? How do we want our transportation facilities to look? What are our preservation goals? Do we want to maintain agriculture as a key part of land use within the community? Things like that. What do we want the community to look like in 20 years? We'll include a detailed evaluation of preservation opportunities, anticipated growth, and then also those impacts. And so when you think about that, we want to think about what growth is expected. How are we going to accommodate that growth? Do we want to accommodate that growth? And then, associated to that, what are the impacts of that growth going to be, and how can we mitigate any negative consequences? How can we grow smart to ensure that we are preserving the natural features, the agricultural features that are important for communities? We'll include an analysis of existing conditions. We'll talk about here in a little bit. Primarily what we're looking for is, where are we today? Where has the community been? It's important to establish a baseline for the community before we look to plan into the future. And then finally, as I've mentioned a couple times, what are some implementation actions that the community can take over the next years? And the goal there is how can we, what are some specific and some a little more general actions that the village can take to make sure we're achieving our desired outcomes and achieving our goal and vision that's been identified in the plan. So we jump to the next slide. This is just kind of what we would consider a pretty typical comprehensive planning process. We start by updating and developing a profile for the community, all the way through identifying issues and opportunities, doing visioning and goal setting, and then actually developing the plan and doing that more detailed analysis. This is the general process we're following for this planning process, but we are taking a little bit different approach in some circumstances because we are trying to focus in on more updates, specifically updates to the land use portion of the plan, because that's where we've seen the most amount of change over the last 7 years since the last plan was adopted. And so what we'll be doing, if we jump to the next slide, and I do have a schedule on the screen here, is we'll be taking, we've kind of outlined from now until the end of the calendar year to work our way all the way through this planning process to provide you the update materials that will be necessary to then go and adopt an updated plan. You'll see that the ones with arrows, the lines with arrows are kind of key time points where we've identified opportunities to come to the board and discuss the plan, the direction, provide, hear direction from you all about the direction the plan's going and get feedback about, what you all would like the final plan to look like. We have scoped the ability to add additional village, board meetings if that's something that's necessary, and I can, work with Chad on that if necessary. Again, we've identified kind of three main time points for that. Now, if we jump to our next slide, taking a step back from looking at that more detailed calendar, we're really looking at kind of three main tasks as a part of this planning process. First, we'll be updating the vision, goals, and objectives. We'll, as a part of that, be hosting an open house where we can solicit feedback from the community. We'll, of course, get feedback from the village board today and at future opportunities. We've already begun reviewing the results of the survey that the village hosted earlier this year. We'll also bring in things like updated demographic data, updated land use information to make sure we're accommodating the change that we've seen from the last plan. And then we'll kind of fold that into a review of the overall vision and then the goals throughout the document to make sure that we can get those sections all updated to reflect, new or changing outlooks for what the community wants to be. From there, we'll be moving kind of in the summer into starting our what we're calling our plan element analysis. This is where we're going to dig into each of the topic specific chapters that are in the existing plan. For all of the chapters, with the exception of land use, we'll be providing recommendations on changes that should be made to those sections as a result of the changes that we've seen and any updates that we'll make to the land use section. That will incorporate things like we'll provide updated data and are in the process of providing updated data for all of the demographics, tables, figures within the plan, but then also updates to any guidance that needs to be changed as a result of changing opinions, changing direction and growth that the community's seen. And then from there, we'll kind of move into what is going to be the bulk of this updating process, and that's going to be our land use planning. And so as a part of this, we'll, update all of our existing land use maps, and then we'll also look at moving forward, what kind of growth outlooks does the community have? Where do we want to locate that growth? We'll look at things like updating our land use goals, our policies. We'll dig into, growth and land use scenarios that you all can review to help understand if we make certain decisions about where we locate development, what that may look like going into the future. We're going to evaluate ideas like development phasing to help the village grow smart and grow kind of controlled from existing developed areas out in a way that we can make sure we're trying to preserve some of these key ag areas and natural areas throughout the community. And some of the actual priorities and policies as to what the direction of this work will look like will kind of come out of these first two steps. And so we'll better understand over the next couple of months what type of land use priorities exist within a village. And so that will allow us to then identify and develop a new future land use map and future land use plan for the community, which is going to be, again, like the bulk and the most important part of this plan. That'll include looking at things like where can we locate, commercial type development, where can we locate, or what can we do to try to identify opportunities to bring employment into the community, as well as considering what type of housing the community wants to accommodate the growth that we kind of would expect to see building on the growth that's occurred in the last 10 years. So before we kind of move on, I do want to stop there quickly and see if there's just any questions or comments from anyone on the board.
Do we get updates through your process? Like, hey, we're working towards this, this is kind of where we're at, or is there, other than the workshops, or do you solicit feedback from Chad and staff and the board as you go through this?
Yeah, we'll be working with, closely with Chad. We can also provide monthly written reports that Chad can share to the board. We can come, in person or virtually and give those reports directly to you. We want to make sure that you all stay informed throughout the process. Because also coming to you and sharing what's occurred over the last month or two or whatever it is, also is a way to make sure that that information is getting out to the public and you can share it with your community members and things like that. So we can make sure that we're keeping you all informed as much as possible.
Have you reviewed, you must have already reviewed the current comprehensive plan. In your opinion, have we achieved most of the goals in that plan? Or I guess I wanted to
Yeah.
kind of step back and say, in that current comprehensive plan, what was our goals? Did we accomplish them?
Yeah.
Where did we not do right? Where did we do right?
Yeah.
You know, I kind of want that analysis
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, and we have, admittedly, we haven't done all of that analysis yet. We began digging into the implementation actions to try to understand what's been accomplished already. And then we'll take a step back and look at the goals to see, if those goals have been achieved or how close the community is to achieving some of those goals. But we don't have that yet. And we will plan on bringing that to you, and we'll work, Chad and I have talked about sitting down for an extended period of time, SRF and village staff to have that conversation and more specifically about what's been achieved and what hasn't.
Any other questions?
I did have one.
Chad? Hang on. We lost Julie, Chad.
She just turned off her video.
Oh,
She's there.
Julie, turn your video back on. I don't know if you can hear us or not. Matt, you had a question?
I did. Well, and
Okay.
question / comment, just, I noticed in the timetable, there's only one open house. And I mean, this is probably one of the most critical things for the community. And so as we get more into more of the land use there, before we would be getting to seeing I guess when you look at phase 3 there of draft and final plan, and stuff and plan adoption, to also really give the community another opportunity to also come in and give feedback to see if as the plan develops, is it hitting the mark or not?
We talked about that, and I think we're gonna try to do a more creative way, so people don't necessarily go to open houses anymore after COVID. I mean, some people will show up, and so we have that, but there's also the good current population that's electronic. So some of this sharing is gonna happen electronically, and try to get input that way to reach all populations versus just open house, which typically tends to be older folks. So the younger folks unfortunately don't come to those types of gates, so we're hoping to do other means to try to reach them as well, we talked about.
That's great. Sounds like you've already thought through some of that then. So no, that's great too. Then I just want to make sure that we're heavily involving the public in this process.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate those comments, and like Chad said, we've talked about alternate methods to get people involved. One of the things that we really like to do is what we call pop-up events, where we actually go to a community event rather than asking them to come to us. We go to them and we provide, set up a table and a booth and have some, 5-minute activity that people can attend. And so there's potentially going to be some opportunity there. We're also going to be doing a pretty significant amount of input for the Calumet County plan. And so there will be some overlap into providing some feedback into this process. And so, within our contract that we have with Chad and the scope, we have a number of other activities that we can incorporate throughout the process. We think we need to do other things to get more people involved in the process.
That's great. Yeah, and we do have
Yeah.
some summer park events, so it'd be very easy to do some pop-ups that way that the community would be there. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, put our fireworks event on your schedule.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, guys? All right, moving on.
All right. And so before we get into kind of some open-ended questions that I'd like to ask you all, I do want to just give a short update on some of the demographics work we've been doing. Like I said a few times throughout my earlier presentation, we will be updating all of the demographics in the plan, and so that will come in the form of a fully new land use chapter, but it'll also come in, a demographics report where we'll identify updated data. So everything will be updated to the 2020 census. And then at this point, we're pulling 2022 American Community Survey data, which gives us things like commuting patterns, commuting time, income, population growth, of course, housing cost, and things like that. And so we'll also be making sure that all the data within the plan gets updated to the current condition. Again, that's kind of going back to that existing conditions. Where are we now before we can really grow into the future? And so the last thing that I, had is a number of discussion questions that we like to start this process with. Some of them are super open-ended, some of them will be a little bit more specific, but my hope was that by opening up the floor to hear some opinions from you all, we'll kind of direct where this discussion goes. Again, like I said earlier, this won't be your last chance to provide feedback, but before we start doing a lot of external facing things and start really doing the bulk of this work, we just wanted to make sure that we've given you all the chance to share what are the big things that we need to make sure we're hitting, or even some of the smaller things that are make sure we're considering throughout the process. So I will stop talking and I'll open up, and if we need, I have got some more pointed
Trustee Ben
questions.
Hefty.
Yes, one of the big things, we're looking for more economic development in the village of Harrison.
Yes.
And, with economic development, I want businesses who would like to relocate here.
Mhm.
They look for traffic counts. A lot of times traffic counts dictate whether or not they'll put a business there or not, just for visibility. So we're also, it's a fine line where we're trying to manage traffic, but not too much traffic, but also trying to encourage, businesses to come here because they need so much, drive-bys to stop in there.
Another big issue I'd like to focus on is affordable housing. Our last consultant that came in here a week ago did their presentation. They said, if you want to have commercial development and industrial development, you have to have beds for those employees to sleep and live.
Mhm.
So even though a lot of people don't like residential growth, it's a necessary evil if you want to have the commercial side of it. So I want to find a way to balance residential growth with our commercial and industrial development.
Mhm.
And also find a way to bring in more affordable housing. Biggest question I get from people is, where can I find a place for my mom and dad to live? Where can my kids can't find a house to buy?
Yep.
So we need to find a way. I know this, the community in general doesn't want any more large apartment complexes.
Mhm.
So we want to stay away from the big apartment complexes.
Sure.
But we do need to find a way to bring in affordable housing.
Yeah, I do appreciate both of your comments. And they are very interrelated. At least we believe they're very interrelated. And so there's definitely strategies on the housing side of things that we can take to provide a more diverse range of housing without just having large apartment complexes. And so there's things like philosophy, what they call missing middle housing, which is like the duplex to the townhome to the 4, 5, 6-plex, where it still looks a lot like a traditional single family development, but it provides more density and additional levels of affordability for people who maybe can't afford to own a single family home on a quarter acre lot.
Julie, you got to turn your mic on. Turn your mic on, Julie.
Yep, got it. Thank you. All right, I'm still getting used to this. I know that Allison just alluded to the affordable housing, and what I'd like to see is senior specific housing. I know that that has been proposed in the village before and met with some resistance because of the number of EMS calls and things like that. But I think it's very important that we offer our population somewhere to move when they no longer want, big house, big yard. So specific to seniors. And the other thing, I'm not sure where this falls or if this even falls within your, sphere of influence, but somehow, and I don't know how we do this, maybe this isn't you, like I said, but to unify our village. So it's not just the, suburban or urban area of Darboy, but that we find a way to bring our community together so that the outreach areas, at the lakeside or, further into the city, further out where I live, which is right on the border of Woodville and Harrison, that we find a way to be more inclusive of the entire village and not just focus on one specific area. So again, not sure what that looks like, but I just want to make sure we're pulling in everybody's opinion when it comes to development of this plan.
Scott?
Thank you. So I appreciate the other members here and what they said. I saw their transportation is a big thing. So one of the things that we've seen from the last comprehensive plan until now, and one of the results is the fact that the traffic is gotten really, really heavy. So we are not getting any help from the state DOT to try to alleviate the intersection of KK and 441.
Okay.
So for me, I think as we think about growth, we need to think about traffic patterns and how we don't make it worse. But also there's a cost to infrastructure when it comes to converting roads, country roads into urbanized roads, and who's paying for it?
Yep.
Right? So one of the concerns that I have is as we approve subdivisions down these country roads are no longer country roads anymore. Now they're heavy with traffic, and over time, they're gonna have to be converted. Well, who's paying for it? What's the cost? So one of the concerns I have with our current comprehensive plan is where are the costs of these subdivisions and how much of that is a burden on the tax base, not just in the current year, but years down the road? You know what I'm saying about, hey, it's gonna be a couple of $1 million to convert a 4-block country road into an urbanized road. Well, I want to know what that number looks like. So as we have these developments come up to us, it isn't just, well, he did his paperwork and he punched it through and the planning commission has no guidelines or no numbers in front of them and says, hey, wait a minute here. If you add these subdivisions, you're gonna incur X amount of money for transferring a road to a country road into an urbanized road. And by the way, now you just hit the tipping point where we're gonna need a new snowplow and we're gonna need a new snowplow truck. So I think having those kind of, I would say, milestone gates saying, okay, guys, if we approve this, this is the cost in the future that we're gonna have to think about and incur.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? Because I think there's a lot of people who've lived here for 20 some years and they're saying, well, why do I have to pay for a road that was a country road 20 years ago and now all of a sudden then taxpayers are on the hook because we said, yeah, go ahead and do it. We didn't think about what there's costs are.
Yeah. No, I another really great comment. That's a issue that a lot of communities run into, especially communities kind of in your position where we're seeing a pretty rapid transition in some areas from a very rural community to a much more urbanized community. And certainly, I would believe that this comprehensive plan needs to address, how are we paying for the impacts of this growth? Because it does impose, large development certainly does impose costs on the rest of the community that often exceeds the additional property tax that will come as a result of the development. So there needs to be considerations as to, how does the village handle that? Part of it is we need to make sure we're locating development in areas that aren't going to have that same level of cost associated with them. But also there's, strategies that communities can use to help alleviate some of those issues.
Yeah, because another thing is I think we're at like 97% residential to business. So as we all think about a plan, I would say we need to, I think, first agree to what that tax base percentage should look like over time, right? Because that should then guide you. kind of disagree with, oh, we're just gonna throw up residential, let's keep throwing up residential. We're at 97%. Now, we've heard other presenters come to us and say, you need to be at 75%.
Mhm.
Okay, so if that's the case, I don't know if that's a true number or not, but we need a roadmap to get us to an agreeable percentage of what's residential to commercial, so we can have that recession-proof economy and you have offset costs instead of the residential taxpayers paying,
Yeah.
you know, the whole bill. You know, if you have businesses that offsets those costs of a fire truck, of a snow plow, you know, it's more, you know, it's offset from, because that's the biggest criticism of us right now, and you'll find this out, we're labeled a bedroom community.
Yeah.
Right, so, so economic development is gonna be a big issue for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I think it's a public safety issue, because if you talk to people, where do they work? Well, they don't work in the village.
Right.
I mean, you'll find out, they have to travel to Pier, to Oshkosh, to Green Bay,
Yeah.
and the heavy traffic on 441 and KK, to me, you're putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a place here where people can basically go a couple blocks to work, I think that's important.
Yeah, we've heard, you know, many of the same things from Chad and staff about, you know, we're trying to be a little bit more of a kind of all-inclusive community, more, less than a, you know, bedroom community. You know, I don't like to use that word, because it's, you know, it comes sometimes with certain connotations, but, you know, I pulled up on the screen the demographic report, that map in the middle kind of emphasizes what you said. You know, the green arrow going out to the right is, you know, 6,000 people leaving the community every day to go to work, whereas there's only 129 or 100, you know, 30-ish living in Harrison, or working and living in Harrison. And so it does kind of emphasize that transportation issues getting to their place of work, but also is there things we can do to increase that number in the middle. We're always going to have some out and in commuting for sure, but can we provide you some strategies to increase that circular number where people are working and living here?
Yeah, I would love to see other people spend money here. So just by that right there, not only do they not work here,
Mhm.
but when they come home and they need to get groceries,
Mhm.
they need to go and get home improvement stuff.
Mhm.
That's money not being spent in our own village. It's money spent in neighboring county and a neighboring community.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a lot of opportunity to fix that.
Trustee Lancaster, I know you've been trying to talk here for a while.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. So just a couple of comments. We definitely need to figure out the cost of residential development. We have a very low tax rate at 349 per thousand. And so when residential development then necessitates upgrading a rural road into an urban road to support the additional traffic, it really becomes cost prohibitive. I know we have in our 5-year road plan right now, for example, a section of Manitowoc Road, and it's estimated to cost several $millions. And the tax base that we get off of residential development in that area, and there's some opportunity in that area to add some additional, but it in no way really pays for those costs. And then when we talk about public works and space and snow plows and snowplow drivers and fire trucks and everything else, I do agree that we do need to look at some senior housing. The problem with some of the senior housing that we've had proposed before is it's been in the form of apartment complexes and assisted living and things of that nature. And so we need to figure out how we can have senior housing more in the single family type layout. And I don't know if that is with planned use development type things with smaller yards, that kind of thing. I know the town of Buchanan, for example, has an area called Buchanan Cottages that really is more of a single family type layout. But they're smaller, more affordable, no yards to keep, no snow to plow, you know, to blow and plow and all of that thing, type of thing. The other piece that I'm sure Chad has shared with you or will share with you if he hasn't yet, He had spearheaded a community survey and we need to make sure we take that feedback into account. And one of the very things that was shown loud and clear by those that took the survey, and so I realized one of the things as we collect feedback is making sure we're reaching all the corners of the village, right? You know, that there is some, depending on methods of doing things, you might get the wrong answers to things because of just audience bias. So we need to make sure we're not being biased to the audiences and really getting complete picture. But they're pretty loud and clear of not wanting any kind of multifamily. Doesn't just, not even just large apartment complexes, even to the point of duplexes. And then the last thing I have here is when we look at some of this residential development, we need to figure out how we can help things fill in that already have, you know, we have a whole area of houses. You'll have a farm field that's still agricultural, and then you'll have houses around that farm field. Let's fill in those areas first before we all of a sudden jump out, you know, another mile, half mile out into the country where now you've got another subdivision popping up in agricultural land, and we have what I guess I would call more urban sprawl. And then of course we definitely need the economic development in Harrison. So thank you.
One other thing I'd like to just comment on. I'm hearing a lot of things about that we don't have enough commercial development. I want you to be sure you include the incredible commercial development we've added just this year alone. In Volta, for instance, that's a multi-million-dollar project. Our commercial development is not a sum zero game. Okay, you don't have to have, you know, this project here doesn't have to be self-supportive. This is what I think Julian was talking about with making the entire village one entity instead of taking the northern part of Harrison as its own standalone entity and the lakeside a separate standalone entity. All of the revenues from all of these areas feed the same bank account. Okay, it's not a sum zero game. So when you're addressing commercial development, you have to look at the opportunities throughout the entire village, not just in one small subsection.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment as well. You know, I think one of the things we can look at is, and we've briefly talked about this with Chad, is, you know, things like agritourism. Are there ways that we can allow, you know, agricultural properties to do some additional value-added activities? Now, some communities like this, some don't, and that's just one option. But there are a lot of things and strategies and you know, guidance we can give them to how to update our, you know, home business codes and things like that to allow people to do a more variety of things on their property without, you know, maybe putting a large commercial development in a place where it may not be supported because it's surrounded by, you know, ag or other things like that. So there's a variety of ways that we can approach this economic development question that will address kind of the whole or the whole village, excuse me, understanding that there's some difference in how, you know, the west side of the village looks compared to the east side of the village.
Key is that all the revenues from all of the developments fund the village. Okay, so we're not paying for that snowplow based on that new subdivision up in Darwood. Okay, it's the entire village that pays for that.
Yep.
Snowplow.
Right. Yep.
Darlene, did you have some comments on that? Okay. Mike, did you have anything you want to add? Mark, did you have anything else you want to add? Are we good? Are we ready to move on, guys? Yep. All right, thank you.
Cool. Thank you all. Appreciate the time.
Did you get enough for tonight, Ben?
I think I did good enough. This was a great
Excellent.
discussion. So I'm glad that you guys, you know, took up and provided a lot of great feedback, and it's not always the way it goes. So I'm really
Chad, you were 4 minutes over with.
All right, well, thank you very much. Well, if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Actually, hold on before we adjourn. Hold on. I did have just a
Trustee
correct,
Lancaster.
thank you. I just had a correction to a future agenda item that's listed out here already. it's listed right now as project plan to bring interceptors 4 and 6 into the Harrison utility system. And that wasn't the
Where are you
request.
looking? Where are you looking? Second page.
Page 2 of the agenda under future agenda items.
Third line from the bottom.
Right above May, June 2020.
Okay, all right.
The request was to look at adding additional interceptors to lift stations 4 and 6 and amending the sewer connection fees with those associated projects.
Well, that won't be done in June. That's a longer term project, trustee Lancaster.
But it
So
was
you'll
for,
have the,
but it was for
Yeah,
us to
that's-
start, it was for us to start having that discussion so that based on all that previous information that Mary has presented to us. And she was here last meeting.
but she
And,
will not be prepared with that by June, not to do those calculations, trustee Lancaster.
but we need,
I'm
but I,
just saying,
but it was to have some discussion so we can start telling her, okay, yes, we want to put an interceptor down here and there, so then she can go and finish up those, she has all those estimates already, but it's to figure out which projects that we're willing to do and not do. So we need to have some discussion on deciding which projects that we're willing to do and not do.
well,
So
that's different. Looking at the projects is one phase of that issue. The other issue that will take a lot more time is the changes in the fees.
yeah, so if I can just add,
Yeah.
you'll recall the board had approved Boardman and Clark to do an update to the chapter 30 utility ordinance, and that is very close. It's probably coming back to the board in May for adoption. That will clean up some of the issues that we're having with these connection fees, and then we're gonna move into a second phase of work with them to look at the charge out and definitions and how that all happens. So I think the trustee Lancaster's point, I don't know, probably don't have anything out right now, but we'll definitely be able to bring back some thoughts on directions that we think should be considered to address both what Mary Jo worked on and the whole connection fee discussion.
So let's leave it set as it is for now, Matt. Everybody knows what.
Well, it's not, but yeah, I know, but what it says is it says to bring interceptors 4 and 6 into the Harrison utility system. There's no such thing as interceptors 4 and 6. They're lift stations. So we just need to
All right, well, we can correct that. to
fix the
lift
language
stations.
is all I'm saying. Thank you.
It's a good catch. And then, but we won't have anything as far as.
To
fee
adopt, yeah, no,
schedule.
it's discussion, right? Yeah, I understand. Yes, that's fine.
All right. All right, so there's a motion. I lost who the motion was.
Motion,
Motion by Mike, second by Darlene.
I,
Vote your ballot. Vote your ballot.
Aye.
Trustee Lancaster, aye.
Okay. Mike, you wanna vote twice there? Oh, I didn't vote for myself. I voted for. All right, let the record show the motion's carried unanimously. We are out of here. Thank you very much. Appreciate